So the day that this mom goes into labor, they go in, it's an exciting day, they go into the hospital, their doctor isn't there, but his partner is. And his partner is known throughout the community as the king of forceps.
No way, that's not a good name to have.
The king of forceps. So this is Mr. Forceps. So during the labor and delivery, the labor and delivery ends up not going as planned, and this is a tough delivery. It's her first baby. So he whips out the forceps and uses them without her consent and crushes this little baby's skull.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Cases Gone Wild. We have a very special guest today, one of my really good friends and one of the, if not the best trial lawyer in the entire world. We have Nick Rowley on the show today, who I've known for a long time, and I met him actually in the halls of Jeffrey Feiger's office back in the day where we had a lot of antics. You know, I had an opportunity to learn a lot from you. You know, I've learned so much from you that helped me in my practice and is going to help other people in their practice. And we have a very special announcement at the end of today's show that you have to wait and see for our listeners, but it's going to be good, and I think people are going to love it. So Nick, just tell us like a little bit about yourself. You have such an interesting story coming from kind of humble beginnings to becoming the top trial lawyer in the country.
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but for those of you who do not know me or know anything about me, I was born and raised in my early years on a farm in Iowa. And then there was a shift, there was a change in the livestock and agricultural industry back in the late 70s, early 80s, and we had to move off of the farm. My dad went to college at University of Iowa, so we ended up, he didn't have a job anymore, so he went to school. I don't know how, but he did. So we lived there. And then from Iowa City, we moved to a border town in Arizona called Nogales. Nogales, Arizona is how I'd pronounce it. So I lived there for a number of years, and my parents split up. My mom went back to Iowa, my dad stayed, and I went back and forth until the age of about 12 between Iowa and Arizona. I was kicked out of school, expelled from every school that I went to from fourth grade through high school.
Every school?
Every single school. Most years, more than one school, because I'd get kicked out of one and I'd go to another.
You got me beat. I only got kicked out of high school once. So see, you got me beat, buddy.
Yeah, I didn't really like school. I didn't like it one bit, to tell you the God honest truth. And I didn't like bullies. And every school I went to, there were bullies, not just one, but many. I enjoyed, I got to a point after being beaten up and bullied quite a bit, living in Nogales. I was the only, Caucasian kid. If you look at my, DNA in my genes, I'm a mix of a bunch of things, but the kids there, I was just a white kid. I was the only one in my class and one of just a few in my school. And I used to get not just bullied, but beat to a pulp sometimes. I mean, just knocked to the ground, beaten, kicked, bloodied, and it became a regular thing. So after a couple of years of that, I learned how to, stand up for myself. I really didn't have an option. And I became somewhat of a scrapper. And the bullies that I thereafter encountered in my life, I'd go fight them. And that's why I'd get kicked out of school. I learned that if you've got a bully there, he's eventually going to come, pick on you. And if he's picking on other people, if you don't put a stop to it, it's just going to continue. So I'd show up at a new school, and within a few weeks, I'd be in a fight with one of those bullies, and I'd get kicked out because you get kicked out of school for fighting. Your record, follows you when you go from one school to another. They take your
Right.
they take your transfer, they take your record, and I'd get called into an office, and they'd say, "Oh, we already know about you. You're trouble. You pull that, and you're going to be out of here too." And my attitude as a young kid was, excuse my language, yeah, fuck you. Fine. I don't want to be here anyways. So every single school I went to, I got kicked out of. I graduated from a school for delinquents with a diploma that I was able to get because I was able to, go in, they'd give me a book. I'd take the book home, full textbook. And then and then whenever I was ready, they'd give me some assignments, and I'd come back in and I'd take a test. I was able to review these books really quickly. I think the first one within the, first week, it was, intro to whatever it was. And I went through the book and I did the assignments, and I came back. I said, "Give me the test." They gave me the test, and I aced the test. I said, "Wow, okay, that class is done towards your high school diploma." Well, shit, that's easy. That's a whole lot, better than sitting in school.
Right.
So I got done with high school, what would have been the middle of my junior year. It wasn't something I planned to do, but when I realized all I have to do is, study a book and take a test, I just started burning through it. My goal was to join the military because I knew that was really my only option because of, how, yes, because of what I thought of school. And I didn't think college was going to be much different. I didn't have, the transcript, and my family didn't have the money to go to college. And up to that point in time, I had been homeless a number of times as a kid. And the military was, that was my path. That was the way to get money for college. That was the way to, find discipline in my life. I had worked really hard. I always had a job. I think from the time I was 10 years old, I was working and earning money, buying my own clothes, oftentimes buying my own food. At the age of 15, I was renting a couch from an immigrant family, and I was working 3 jobs. I'd pay them $50 a week to sleep on their couch and use their shower. I didn't have a car, but I'd take the bus and find different ways to get to my 3 different jobs. Went into the military, became a medic. I served a total of 6 years, and during that time I finished college through the military's tuition assistance program. And then I was able to start law school as an active reservist with the U.S. Army. And then during law school, I became certified as a law student. I went to law school in California, which is a place I really hadn't lived and didn't have a lot of experience with. But what I knew is that it was going to be a lot warmer than Thomas M. Cooley in Michigan, where I'd been accepted, or Drake University in Iowa, where I was on the waiting list. So I ended up going to this school in California called Laverne. I was out visiting my dad. I had spent the summer backpacking in Alaska between my time in the U.S. Air Force and my time in the U.S. Army. I took a military hop, which is you get on a military plane. You show up, and if whatever direction the military is flying, if you're in the service, they have an extra seat. You can pay $15 and you get a free trip. So I flew up to Alaska, and I actually ended up getting stuck up there. I couldn't find a flight back, and I only had a few $100 in my bank account. So I ended up backpacking around Alaska, spending time with a good friend of mine that I had served with. And I got back. I caught a C-130 to Fort Lewis, Washington. And then I had to find a way to get back to the military base. It was an air defense artillery unit that I was a part of. And I couldn't get a flight back. I couldn't afford a flight. And my dad, my biological father, said, "Hey, you haven't came and seen me for a long time. So why don't you come down? Your brother and your sister are here for the summer. Why don't you come down, and if you can get a flight, down here to one of the military bases, I'll pick you up and I'll buy you a Greyhound bus ticket to get you back to wherever you need to go." I said, "Oh, okay, that's a heck of a deal." So I was able to jump on another military flight from Fort Lewis, Washington, down to Edwards Air Force Base. He picked me up. I spent about a week and a half with him and my brother and sister. And while I was there, my dad says, "Why are you going to law school back in the Midwest? Why don't you go to a law school here?" And I said, "Well, I haven't applied to any law schools, out here in California." He goes, "Well, there's one like right up the road. You should go talk to him. You're good at talking to people." I said, "Yeah, okay, all right, fine. I'll entertain you." So I go to this school called University of Laverne, and I walk in, and I said, "This is the admissions director here." I forget who I asked for, but I asked for the right person, and I said, "I'm accepted at some law schools in other states, but I know it's late. That I thought I'd see if you guys have any openings." And at this point, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't have any lawyers in my family. I just knew I wanted to go to law school. I had followed Jerry Spence for years, and
Right.
they said, "Well, have a seat." And the admissions director came out. He goes, "Come on into my office." He asked me, about myself, and I told him who I was, and I had a good GPA with the college degrees that I had achieved, that I had got during my service. I think I had an associate's, and I had 3 associate degrees and 1 bachelor's degree, and I had a really high GPA. And so he goes, "It just turns out that I know it's late last minute, but I think we have an opening. I think we can get you in." Well, it turns out that it was a law school that would pretty much accept anybody. And it was a law school that was not accredited by the American Bar Association. I had no idea what the American Bar Association was. I didn't know what ABA was. I had no clue. But I did ask him. I said,
Yeah.
my goal here is to go to law school and then go back to my home state of Iowa and to practice there. If I go to law school here at this school, it's a California school, can I go practice in Iowa? And he goes, "Oh, yeah, sure. We have lawyers practicing in other states. You just have to apply to take the bar exam there." Well, he didn't tell me that it was just a California bar accredited school. So I went to law school. I was serving in the military at the time. I was doing a lot of mixed martial arts, cage fighting, actually, and trying to make money any way that I possibly could.
Wow.
And the first year of law school was pretty tough. I barely made it. I was like right on the cusp of being put on academic probation. I went to this exam writing course that summer. I did a deployment with the military, and then I came back and I took this exam writing course. It would have been the fall then of my second year. And there's this girl sitting next to me who I was talking with and very friendly with. And she says, what are you going to do when you get out of law school? I said, "Well, I'm going to go back to my home state of Iowa and practice law there, be a small town lawyer." She said, "Well, you can't go back and practice in Iowa because you're not going to an ABA school." She was going to Stanford of all places. And I sat there, and for the first time,
Wow.
I said, "Well, what's an ABA school?" And she looked at me like I was the village idiot, which I was. So the next week I stormed into, the admission director's office, and I said, "You didn't tell me this wasn't an ABA school." I was really bent out of shape. But so I realized that I was going to be stuck practicing law in California for the first 5 years of my career because I wouldn't be eligible to take the bar exam in other places, but I'd be able to get admitted by motion in other states, in particular my home state of Iowa, after 5 years of practice. So I get certified as a law student during my second year of law school, and I started participating in hearings and I started trying cases. It took me 3.5 years to go to law school because I was doing it part-time. So I got certified as a law student, and I could do everything that a lawyer could do. And I worked for a lawyer who was not a courtroom lawyer, but he had some medical malpractice cases. And because I was a medic, I was able to look at these medical malpractice cases and walk in and go toe-to-toe with the experts and the medical malpractice defense lawyers. So when I finished law school, I had quite a bit of courtroom experience, and I had already tried cases. So I took the bar. When I took the bar exam, I studied for 11 weeks, 11 hours a day, I didn't, if I took a minute off to use the bathroom, that didn't count. It was 11 hours for 11 weeks. And I had learned in life that if you want to succeed at something, you just need to outperform, the person to your right, the person to your left, the person behind you, the person in front of you. Just outperform them, work harder. So I checked in with everybody and checked in with the different, bar exam instructors and said, how many MB questions do people do to prepare for the bar? How many performance tests? How much time do people put in? And I basically took that average and added about 30% to it. And that's how I came up with the calculation that 11 weeks, 11 hours a day would be enough. I parked a camper down at Camp Pendleton, which is a Marine Corps base down in San Diego County. And I took my dog and I parked it on a little lake that they had there. And that's where I stayed for 11 weeks.
That's amazing. And it's part of your story, reminds me, Jeffrey used to always say, people, what's your secret? Jeffrey Feiger, who I know and I know that you've worked with him on things. And he said, I'm going to outwork everybody else. I'm going to, one of the biggest things is working hard. And do you think that your childhood and kind of coming from some of those experiences is an asset for you in your practice now and being able to take on bullies? Because you've taken on some of the biggest bullies in the country in terms of your cases, which we're going to talk about today. But do you find that as helpful, those experiences, even though they were hard at the time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a fight in me that it's just there. It's hard to describe. As far back as I can remember. From the first time that I got, beat up and I remember they would have me sit at the front of the bus, the front of the school bus, and then let me get off to give me a running start before they let the rest of the kids off the school bus down in this border town. And most of the time, I'd get away, but sometimes they'd catch me. And from the first time they, got me and, beat me up, and I remember being on the ground, and there were a few of them, but there was a big scary kid, and he said, "We'll stop, but you have to kiss the ground and you have to kiss my feet." And I wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't do it. No matter how hard I was hit or how hard I was knocked down, I wouldn't stop trying to get back up. There's just something in me that won't stay down. So I've taken that all through life, through growing up, serving in the military, and what I went through there, practicing law, you name it. There's something in me that I won't stay down. And it served me very well. That fight has also, when I was younger, and still sometimes, put me in situations where I'm fighting a fight that doesn't need to be fought, right? I'm looking like I'm expecting the fight. I'm realizing now that, and a lot of it is because people don't want to fight me anymore unless they really have to,
right?
Because I've proven myself. But I'm just expecting. I'm expecting the bully, waiting for me around the corner.
Right.
I'm always ready. I'm always looking for it, and I'm okay with it. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid, because the moment that I get beaten down and I can't get up again, I don't need to worry about it.
Well, you've been very successful.
I'm done. I'm dead. But until then, I'm going to keep fighting.
Right. I mean, you've had billions of dollars in verdicts. I don't know anyone who's more successful of a trial lawyer as you in taking on some of these bullies. And can you tell us, so on this show, we talk about, we have a lot of our listeners are lawyers, and a lot of our listeners are just, people who are interested in the law and some of these crazy cases. Can you tell us some of your crazy cases? I know you just took on Tesla. and got a huge verdict against them in a very difficult case where you were basically taking on a lot of bullies in a lot of different ways, from what I hear. Can you talk about that and tell us about some of the bullies that you've taken on?
Sure, I can talk about the Tesla case. And yeah, that was a $60 million damages verdict that, had comparative fault assessed. So the actual amount that's owed with the prejudgment interest will, be up to, I think it's at, $44 million now, and it's accumulating.
Wow.
That's a large verdict, John, but the truth is the verdict isn't big enough. It should have been more. And I look at that trial and I think I could have done a better job. I really do. So I look at that and everyone says, wow, look at that great result. And I say, yeah, I look back and I think I could have done a better job in that trial. I took their bait and I was really in that fight. If I would have had more clarity and a little more wisdom, I think the result would have been better. So
I think most attorneys would say that you're amazing, but you're self-critical of yourself. I am too a lot on trials. No matter, people say, how are you upset about that? And I say, I think it's a striving to do better. But can you tell us about that case and what happened? And or do you want to talk about
Sure.
different cases that are interesting? I know you just finished that.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've tried other cases since then. I've done 5 jury trials this year. And I think I'll do 3 or 4 more. I've tried an average of 10 jury trials a year. Throughout my career, I've been practicing 22 years. During COVID, of course, I didn't try any cases, but for about a year and a half.
Right.
So there's a juror that I should not have left on that jury. And she lied through her teeth. This juror is a despicable human being. And I'm disgusted by what this juror did. During jury selection, a big issue in this case was that the man I was representing, Chris Dugan, wasn't wearing a helmet. But under Indiana law, that's irrelevant. You don't have to wear a helmet. And that cannot be used in any way, shape, or form to reduce the damages or to impose any liability on the motorcyclist, because under Indiana law, just like Iowa law, you don't have to wear a helmet. So it's not
Right.
It's not negligence. So we could have kept that fact from the jury because it's inadmissible as a matter of law. But we figured out through the work that we had done, and we did John Campbell's big data. If you look at what John Campbell and Sean Claggett have been doing, they've been doing a lot of research over the past decade, and they have a great system in place where it's called big data. I would strongly advise any lawyer that's trying a case to spend the money to have their case ran through their program and get an assessment. So, we had done that work and we realized that the jury was probably going to realize and find out that he wasn't wearing a helmet.
Sure.
I believe in being brutally honest. So tell the jurors what the bad facts are and talk to them about it. And our research, told us, our work, we did a lot of prep work in the case, told us that if we told the jurors about the helmet issue during jury selection, that the jurors, that we would identify jurors who would have major issues with the helmet, that would also, in turn, therefore have major issues with damages. So the bad jurors, well, I don't want to say bad, but the jurors who would be unable to get past the lack of the helmet, despite what the law had to say, were the same jurors who would have been low damage jurors, right?
Right.
So we decided, because we wanted to be honest with the jury, and by being honest, that would help us identify the low damage jurors who were going to be problematic, to begin with, that we would tell the jury in jury selection in voir dire that he wasn't wearing a helmet, and tell them what the law says and ask them if they're going to be able to follow the law. So I did
even
that.
though
Talked about
technically
a
you
helmet.
didn't have to.
No, technically we didn't have to.
Wow.
So this juror in particular raises her hand, speaks up, and says, well, we're a motorcycle family. And the fact that he wasn't wearing a helmet is irrelevant. He didn't have to wear a helmet. That has no bearing on the case. She was like the first person to come out and say that. Something in my gut told me that she was bad. Not that she just, wasn't good, but she was bad. She was rotten. And I had a whole team there, helping me pick the jury. But at the end of the day, it's my decision.
Right.
It's my decision. And there's someone I listened to that said she's going to be just fine for you. She's a good juror, keep her. And my gut told me no. And it came down during jury selection to her and another juror who had been a med pay adjuster for Geico Insurance Company. I mean, who cares about med pay?
Boy.
She did that for a few years. Right. She did that for a few years. And then she was working at Goodwill or something, right? And she was a mom.
Right.
And she didn't seem like a leader. She seemed like a follower. So in my mind, I'll stick with her, but my gut's telling me I got to get rid of the motorcycle lady.
Yeah.
And I listened to somebody who told me, no, you need to get her off the jury. The motorcycle lady's going to be fine. And I listened. Where my gut told me and my experience told me, and I listened, and I should not have. So, come to find out, the case was bifurcated. Jurors in Indiana are allowed to deliberate throughout the entire trial. Every break, every lunch, they're allowed to deliberate, which is something I'd never experienced before. From the first break, first lunch, first day, she kept saying he should have been wearing a helmet. That juror, that motorcycle lady, and she was awful. And she was the one juror, it had to be a unanimous verdict. She's the one juror that insisted that Chris be found negligent and that 30% be apportioned against him. And she was the only juror who wanted to keep the verdict below $100 million.
Do you think she was intentionally lying to you to be like a stealth
Yes.
juror?
Yes. And I've seen that a few times. I've seen that a few times in the past few years.
Yeah, it's always tough, like when you look back and your gut, like I find my gut is usually right as opposed to my brain, because I've been dropped on the head a few too many times. But it's hard.
Well, I've been really bothered by this because I teach people to love and trust the jury. During jury selection, you've got to be careful nowadays because we have leaders and we have a large portion of the people in our country who now believe that it's okay to lie. Lying is acceptable. Lying doesn't disqualify you from being United States president. Lying through your teeth over and over and over again doesn't result in people not supporting you. So people are being taught by those that they look up to the most that it's okay to lie. So I've seen that now, and it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing. That's why I believe that having more time with jury selection, being able to truly, do what you need to do and get the time with the jury during voir dire, jury selection, is necessary. These states that only give you 20 minutes or no voir dire, we're going to see, more and more bad results because people will lie. It's okay to lie now, where 10 years ago,
that's a shame.
It was really frowned upon. Yeah, it is a shame. It is a shame.
Well, thanks for sharing that story, Nick.
So
it is a shame. Let me ask you a question. What is your most proud case? And for when we say most proud, I bet for it's not the most money, it's not the biggest verdict, but what is the case where you feel that justice was done, and maybe it was a difficult case or whatever it is, but personally for you, what case do you look back and say, you know what, that is the case. That is the case I'm so proud of.
There's a case I tried in California about 13 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. It's still, I think the largest or one of the top two. I think it's the largest medical malpractice verdict in California state history. And it was a birth injury case for a little girl named Sophia Blunt. And the case had been, worked up and ready for trial. I was brought into the case shortly before trial and told by the firm, which was a very experienced med mal firm that did birth injury cases. And they brought me in and they said, hey, will you try this case? It's in San Luis Obispo and no one's ever won a large verdict up there. And there's never been a medical malpractice verdict for a patient in history. So,
Wow.
and the trial lawyer who was the partner in the firm was in his 70s. And he says, I don't know that I can go in and win this case, but I look at your record, I see what you're doing, and I'm, wondering if you'll consider doing this. I said, well, let me meet the family. I met Jennifer Blunt and, her daughter Sophia. This is a beautiful, beautiful family, beautiful little girl who would never, walk or talk or walk down the aisle or feed herself or, all the kids, who suffer with spastic quadriplegia, how hard it is for them. You know these cases.
Right.
I know
It's
you've
horrible.
handled them.
It's horrible.
I know Samantha's handled them. And so I met them and I said, I'll try the case. And people told me, I said, this is a zero offer case and, you're probably not going to win it. And I got all the boxes, these boxes and boxes of medical records, and I sat down on my living room floor, and I spent night after night going through every single medical record. And if I go through a medical record or a document and I touch it, and then it goes into my head, and I have somewhat of I have a photographic memory, so if I put it into my brain the right way. So I memorized this entire case, and because to me, there was no way that I was going to lose this case. It was life or death. And I went up there and we tried the case. I tried it with my partner, Robert Ungen, who was, my partner at the time, and Rod Rittner, who I'd been practicing with since, the beginning of my career. We all went up there together, and, I picked the jury, did the opening, did the closings, did, most of the witnesses, but I had my team there with me, and they each, played a huge part in this trial. That there was no way that we were going to lose this trial. And the defense had, the best, the top experts, from, Stanford here, there, coming in with all their credentials, telling the jury why this was, why this was, a case where there was no negligence, and just, sometimes bad things happen. Babies just come out brain damaged. And it was a tough thing it was a tough case. I was scared because no one had ever won a med mal case there, and no one had ever won a big verdict there. And the defense, they were so emboldened. I had tried up to that point in my career, a lot of cases, I think upwards of 100 jury trials, more than 100 jury trials at the time. And you try a case and you see that you're winning, and you see that, your opponent is scared. But throughout this trial, and it lasted close to a month, they were not scared. They were just emboldened. And I couldn't read the jury. And the jurors that I had ended up with were, it wasn't your, your ideal jury if you stereotype them.
Right.
I had an engineer from Iraq. Yeah, I had an engineer from Iraq who, ended up on the jury. I tried to get him off. And he said, I just don't believe that these cases are, I'll be fair, I'll be impartial, I'll, follow the judge's instruction, base my decision on the evidence. but I don't like these cases, and I don't think you should sue doctors, right? And I mean, there was, there were nurses on the jury. It was tough.
Oh my God.
And rather than trying to read the jury, I just focused. I kept my eye on the ball. And there were, experts that I cross-examined. I'm like, God, I think I got him, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I finished the trial, and in rebuttal, I picked up Sophia, and she's heavy at this point. I mean, not a little baby anymore, pretty heavy. I walked up and I held her in front of the jury, and I said, her parents they've been carrying her, they've been holding her, and we want her to live a full life expectancy, and I'm holding her right now, and she's so heavy, and we can't hold her alone. We need you. We need you to hold her. You're the ones. And, please don't drop her. Please don't let her go, because you're the only ones that can hold her for the rest of her life. Your verdict. And, it wasn't something I planned to do. It was something like right there in the moment. It's the last words I get to say to the jury. And how can I communicate to them how important this is, and, how heavy, this case is, how heavy she is, and I had to stop because I was choked up, and that's how I sat down and ended the closing. And they deliberated, and they came back with a $74.5 million verdict.
Wow.
Yeah, still.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they cried, and they, hugged her parents. It was good.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that, Nick. That's such a great feeling to be able to do that, especially when you have the defendants and the defense attorneys being so arrogant and so self-assured and so self-righteous and telling you you're never going to do it. You can never do it. And her, it's not worth anything here. It's such a good feeling to be able to get justice for a family like that.
That defense lawyer, his name is Pete Bertling, and he's a good guy. Shortly after that, he stopped doing med mal defense.
Wow.
Yeah.
So maybe you made a difference in his life.
Yeah, and then what happened? This was Sutter Health. This was a really big institution. They changed policy. Like things were changed. What happened to Sophia and what we did actually changed policy. So that's a big one.
That's amazing. Well, Nick, before we'll do one last case, I'd like you to share with us, and maybe on a more lighthearted note, tell us about.
Yeah, I've got two to go. I've got two.
All right. Because you're on Cases Gone Wild, so tell us about the cases that you want to tell us about. We'd love to hear about them.
All right, two cases. So they're both medical malpractice cases, although I try a lot of cases that are not med mal. Sure. And really quick, the cases I'm very proud of are the criminal cases that I've tried. I'm very proud of those. I've done that pro bono throughout my entire career, and every case I've ever done has resulted in an acquittal. I know that's how you and I met, is on one of those cases that I didn't end up trying. Wow. But I think that is trial lawyers who do big civil cases and win big money. We should be giving back and doing pro bono criminal defense when we can. And we should always have one or two cases because we can make a huge difference. There are people out there being
100%
prosecuted overzealously and wrongfully accused, and they need us. So the Hewitt case, I'm sitting at home. It's a Saturday. and I get a call. Some lawyers in Iowa, my home state, they say, hey, we've got this case going to trial on Monday. And the case involves a
On
man
Monday?
who went
2 days later?
on Monday. Yeah. So it's a Saturday
No
evening.
way.
Basically
You're
36
crazy,
hours
Nick.
later, we're going to trial. And this man had his prostate removed. They told him he had cancer, but they had the pathology slides mixed up with another patient. So he never had cancer. And the MMIC insurance adjuster by the name of Nicole Graziano called us up and said that a case like this in Iowa for a 65-year-old man is only worth $300,000. And they had offered, I don't know, maybe 900,000 or something. And they said, and we want your advice on, what to say to the jury, how to pick the jury, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, is there any chance you could come in and try the case? So I heard about the case, I listened a little more, and I put the phone down for a minute and I said, babe, I told Courtney, we finally had like a little bit of time to just, be parents together. And I told her, and she goes, no, you got to go to Iowa. So I called my partner, John Kawai, and I said, you know what? We're going to Iowa tomorrow. We're going to trial. So I called the pilots.
Not a lot of time to get ready.
Not a lot of time to get ready. So I called the pilots, and the next morning we jumped in the airplane and we flew to Iowa. And I picked the jury Monday. I was only allowed to tell the jury that the case was worth $15 million because of the interrogatories. The lawyers who had the case said that's what the case was worth, and you can't tell. It's called Gordon v. Knoll is the case, and so unless you give them a higher dollar amount in the interrogatories, you're not allowed to tell the jury the case is worth more. So I was only able to tell the jury the case was worth $15 million.
That's crazy.
And we got 12 and a half. It was a great case, but when I did right at the last minute, great result. Sad case. And then
How do you get ready for a trial in
here's
24
one.
hours?
You learn the human story and focus on what's most important. I've tried a lot of cases, probably tens of cases, 50 plus cases where I've been brought in with a week or 2 weeks or even a few days notice. And I get the file, I meet the client, I go in and I tell the human story and slug it out.
Not a lot of lawyers can do that.
No, I think that there are more lawyers out there that just don't know that they can. And there are lawyers, and I can guarantee you, I know you, John, and I've seen you over the years. You're absolutely capable of it. And sometimes lawyers they're just in the trenches, reading through depots and this and that, and they, miss the forest for the trees, right? So
For sure.
Those of us with experience can go in and say what's important. We can go in and try a case and figure it out as we go. And sometimes the defense is so focused on something they don't understand the whole human story, or the human story hasn't been developed. And you actually sit down and you spend time with the real human beings that are involved, and you learn the human story, and you look at the whole case that hasn't been told. You go in and you tell that story, and the case that you're trying is not the case that the defense has been preparing to try. So
right. For the last 3 years, it's a different
working
case
when
you come to trial.
Litigating a case, and the case that you try to the jury, oftentimes they're very different. So there was that case, and then there's another case. It was a birth injury case that we tried in a farming community, and again, zero offer case. And I ended up trying that case against a very famous, experienced, very dangerous medical malpractice defense attorney whose briefcase I used to carry as a law clerk.
No way.
So we go in to try this case. His name's Duke DeHaas, someone I still get along with really well, and I think the world of Duke. But he is on the other side. He does med mal defense work. So we end up in trial together on this case. It's me and Courtney. It's another brain damaged baby, and this is a case where the baby's head was baby's brain was damaged by forceps, by an aggressive forceps delivery. Mom is a school teacher, dad is an engineer, and they had gone in and they were so diligent. They had their birth plan all prepared, and they had their doctor, and they go in for their appointments, and there was one thing that they wanted to make sure of. They wanted to make sure that when their baby was delivered, that forceps would not be used. And so their doctor told them, and they had this conversation. They wrote notes. The dad's an engineer. And the doctor said, not only said, we won't use forceps. You don't have to worry about that. He said, forceps are archaic.
Wow.
So the day that this mom goes into labor, they go in, it's an exciting day. They go into the hospital. Their doctor isn't there, but his partner is. And his partner is known throughout the community as the king of forceps.
No way. That's not a good name to have.
The king of forceps. So this is Mr. Forceps. So during the labor and delivery, the labor and delivery ends up not going as planned, and this is a tough delivery. It's her first baby. So he whips out the forceps and uses them without her consent, and crushes this little baby's skull, brain bleed, and now she has spastic quadriplegia. Is just as badly damaged as the little girl I was talking about earlier. So we try the case, and Courtney, I do the voir dire. Courtney does the opening statement, and she does this phenomenal opening statement. She's got the forceps in front of the jury, and it's just one of the best opening statements I've ever seen. We put mom on the stand. It's a Friday. And we put mom on the stand for we have 15 minutes left. The judge says, well, should we break? And I said, no, I wanted to put mom up. So we put mom up on the stand. We brought up those forceps and just had her tell the jury our birth plan was no forceps. We were told forceps were archaic. And then we end up with this guy, and he uses forceps without my permission. The jurors have seen the pictures of the baby's head and the forceps. And we stop. On Monday, we go in, and rather than mom taking the stand again to finish, mom wasn't available. We had to tell the judge, Your Honor, sorry. Mom has to take care of the baby today, she was big at this point, and so she can't be here. We'll continue with her testimony later. Some might say that was strategic, but that's just how it happened. So, who's the next witness going to be? Well, throughout jury selection, and openings, each day, this medical group, because we were suing the medical group, in the medical group, if you look at the doctors in the small farming community, if you had every doctor in this medical group in the courtroom, you would make sure that most of the people on that jury knew, the medical group, because one of these doctors delivered their child or their grandchild or somebody, right? So first day of trial, Duke DeHaas, gets up and introduces Dr. Johnson. This is Dr. Johnson. He's here representing the group today. Dr. Johnson has nothing to do with the case at all, right? Then the next day, this is Dr. Ramirez. This is Dr. Ramirez. He's representing the group today. Each day was a dog and pony show. They were intentionally bringing different doctors in each day to represent the group, to show the jurors in this zero offer case that we were, the big bad guys, suing the small town medical group. So Monday comes around and they introduce a new doctor, and they get him up there. Well, it turns out that these defense lawyers, had listed on their 2034 expert designation, you list out your experts, right? And then you list out all your percipient experts. They listed every single doctor from their medical group as an expert witness. So they introduced this Yahoo, whatever the heck his name was. This is so-and-so representing the group today. And so I knew the birthing strips, like the back of my hand at this point. So my first witness on Monday was that doctor. I said, Judge, we're going to call Dr. So-and-so to the stand. Duke gets up here. Objection, Your Honor, that's improper, this and that. Da, da, da. He's just here representing the group. And we go up in a sidebar. I said, Your Honor, here's their expert designation. He's in court. They never withdrew him. He's locked in. He has to testify. He's an expert. And
what did you ask him?
I went through all the fetal monitoring strips for 3.5 hours. That entire morning, I went through everything. And I said, see that? What's that? That's a deceleration. That's right. The baby's heart rate has dropped. That's right. And I just went through it. And I said, and that's scary and that's bad. And by the time I was done, everything I said he was agreeing with, his head was down. And I said, and you're designated as an expert in this case, but they never showed you these fetal monitoring strips, did they? I got it. They should have called for a C-section. You would have called for a C-section. That's a standard care. Yes, that's true. I mean, it was so bad. They're losing their mind. So they go to lunch. And this guy has given me the entire case.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was, the jurors are just shaking. I mean, it's bad. He gave me the entire case as an expert. And I did this.
That's awesome.
This wasn't planned. This was in the moment, on the fly. You know what? I'm going to put this fucker up here. And we're going to go over the fetal monitoring strips, right? Because unless you're a well-prepared liar, there's no way you're going to get away from me on this.
Right. Oh, that's genius.
He goes to lunch. He comes. They cut, and I see them. I see them walking out to lunch, and he's just shaking his head, and they're pointing their finger at him, And so he comes back from lunch. He's still on the stand. And he's got this new burst of energy. He's like moving around. And so he gets up there. And I said, Doctor, I think you have something that you want to say. As I got back up. He goes, I do. And I said, well, go ahead and tell the jury.
What did he say?
Turns to the jury and he goes, well, I'd like to take back a lot of the things that I said.
Stop.
Oh, man. And so... No, I couldn't make this up.
Yeah.
And I said, just tell him, just go ahead. And I just sat there, and for 5-10 minutes he went off, and the jurors are sitting there.
It was too late. Said, nothing he said.
I said, you went to lunch with this team here, right? Your lawyers.
Yeah.
He goes, yes, I did. I said, and did they take you to the woodshed? Objection! Right?
Oh.
And they go, attorney-client privilege. And I said, well,
oh boy,
I don't want to, have you violate the attorney-client privilege, but you were designated as an expert.
Yeah.
So my question is do you know what the words taken to the woodshed means? And he goes, yes. And I said,
oh, wow. That's it.
They paid us every amount of insurance that was available in that case.
Oh, that's an awesome story.
There's a story.
That is that is a Cases Gone Wild. Well, I want to thank you so much. Let me ask you one last question before we tell our listeners about this great surprise, exciting news. What is the craziest, unexpected thing that has ever happened to you in the middle of a trial? And maybe it was that. I was just trying a case here in Macomb County, and you're not going to believe this. I don't know if I told you this, but my client was an elderly woman. The defendant gets on the stand on Thursday. He blames my client for everything. She was hit by an ambulance, and this ambulance driver was just so mean to her. She goes home and has a stroke that night in the middle of trial. It was, just something that you can't make up. It was crazy. Have you ever had anything what's the craziest thing that's happened in the middle of your trial where you had to completely redo or refigure or something like that?
So I'm trying a brain injury case, premises liability case, 14 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't know how long ago it was, but it was a while ago, against Jim Yukovich. Jim Yukovich is someone who, if you ever have him on a case, you better really watch out and prepare, because he is good. I think he's the best defense lawyer in the country. Hope he does some plaintiff's cases someday. Someone who I get along with greatly and who I would call a friend. But back then we were not friends. He was brought into a case that Bob Tyson, Tyson and nuclear verdicts, right? I was trying a case against Bob Tyson that he came in on at the last minute and was just cleaning the courtroom with him so bad that right before closing argument, his clients fired him, and the judge held an in-camera hearing where he decided that there was such a big conflict that that the defendants had to be allowed to fire him. And
oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So that they could go get new counsel. I mean, this is right as we were about to close the case. So the defense brings in Jim Yukovich, and what would have been a multi-8-figure verdict against Tyson, Mr. Nuclear Verdicts. And we're actually going to be writing a rebuttal to that ridiculous book. Ended up being a 7-figure verdict because Jim Yukovich came in. So wow. I have a witness testifying, kind of a percipient witness who's the boyfriend of the mom of the child who ended up brain injured. So he testifies, and Jim Yukovich gets up and cross-examines this guy in a way that I've never seen before. This guy's head is spinning. He impeaches the heck out of him. Really hurts our case.
Yeah.
But really, just nails this guy. Just nails him down. And he does it in a way that didn't turn off the jury. He just did it in such an effective, surgical way. And when this guy got off the stand, he didn't look right. He took 3 steps and
no way.
Yep. Hit his head on the ground, just passed out. Boom. Had to call an ambulance. The ambulance had to come in and, take him out. And I was blown away. Yeah, that was
mistrial or no?
No, there's no mistrial. There was no mistrial. We tried the case. I got a 7-figure verdict, but it was not the verdict that I would have got against Bob Tyson. That's for sure.
Oh wow, that is crazy. Nick, you're the man. I'm so happy to be your friend and be able to share some of your stories with our listeners. I'm happy and excited to announce that you, along with your wonderful wife and great trial lawyer, Courtney, are going to be coming to Detroit summer of 2025 for the Trial Lawyers Summit for plaintiffs' lawyers to help teach and share some of your stories and your techniques and your trial by human with our community here, which Samantha Teal and I are hosting. We're excited to have you come to the Motor City. We're excited to have Courtney come to the Motor City. Haitham Faraj and some of these other great trial lawyers are going to be coming as well.
So
yes.
Those of you who don't know Haitham Faraj, you should. Haitham is, I believe, one of the best trial lawyers in this country. He is phenomenal. This is a man who served 22 years in the Marine Corps and started out, defending, soldiers in war crime cases. Then he did criminal defense, and he started practicing civil law with me, and we practiced together most of my career. Someone who I consider a true brother. He has been slaying it in the courtroom the past number of years, winning, multi-figure verdicts over and over and over again. He recently, won an unwinnable case for our firm in Iowa. I'm really excited that he's going to be joining us. So any trial you can watch that Haitham Faraj.
Yeah, originally from Dearborn, Michigan, too.
Yeah, and that's where we all used to hang out. It was in Michigan together.
That's right. Yeah, well, thanks, Nick. The date is June 20th. We're excited to have the best trial lawyers, you headlining, come in, and it's really great because we need better trial advocacy here in Michigan. I don't know how else to say it. we just need a greater level. And so I'm really excited. Samantha is very excited to have you here. We love you. We can't wait to see you in the summer, and we appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, brother.